Gabriel has fallen in price, and two of my transfer targets in Foden and Alvarez rose in price last night. And in this video, I'm going to tell you the transfers that I made or intend on making. So you want to stick around for this video. Make sure you do drop a like, and of course, smash that subscribe button. Without further ado, let's get into today's Game Week 3 transfer plans. Okay, so first up, of course, we need to look back at Game Week 2 and how exactly I got on. It was 49 points and a red arrow to an overall rank of 1.55 million. And I can't lie, I am absolutely fine with that overall rank. Not necessarily the players and how they got on this week, but honestly, if you're watching this right now, you're in the top 2 mil, top 3 mil, nothing to panic about right now, because the gap between somebody who's at 1.5 million and someone that's 500k is very, very minimal. So make sure you are not panicking in FPL as we speak. But look, 49 points for the team. Some standouts were Stupinan and Ibuemo, of course, but some serious failures for my Arsenal triple up, my Man United double up in midfield, even Haaland is captaincy, but thankfully a lot of FPL managers went for him, so that one didn't really affect the team. But looking at the team off the basis of Game Week 2 alone, I think there are a few transfers that do need to be made, or at least considered, for this squad. The double Man United midfield, we need to talk about that in this video and whether it is worth selling them. And the double Arsenal midfield, they really aren't cooking like they were last season early doors. So we need to assess whether they are still FPL value. Of course, Saka is now off penalties on the basis of what we saw in Game Week 2 of Odegaard scoring that penalty. So we need to actually judge, are these players as good as what we thought? The same applies to Watkins. I know he got an assist in Game Week 2, but now he's off penalties to Douglas Luiz. Is he actually worth 8 million? Because we're paying that much for a forward. We want to at least know that they're going to be guaranteed those penalties in their respective teams. And of course, I am still having a Gabriel-shaped problem in my team. Coming off the bench when Arsenal had 10 men, he is still obviously a problem. I'm going to tell you exactly if I have sold him or who I plan on selling him to in this video. But look, 49 points, I'm okay with that. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And of course, how did you get on in Game Week 2? So next up, let's look at these Gabriel replacements for my team, what direction I want to take it to. So I just want to quickly round up my Gabriel thoughts going into Game Week 3, whether you should sell him, whether you shouldn't, and some of the replacements that I think for my team are beneficial. Now, in terms of Gabriel, why FPL managers selling him? Well, it's because he's been benched in the last 2 game weeks. And Arteta has stated this is due to tactical reasons, but we don't really know the whole story behind it. He came off the bench in both Game Week 1 and Game Week 2, which has been a real issue for our teams, blocking some subs that could have automatically come in and saved the day for our teams. Now, the big problem for me here is that he stated it is tactical reasons, which suggests to me that there's going to be a lot of systems, a lot of teams that they face that Gabriel is simply not required in. And that's mainly going to be the games where they need to take complete control of it from a possession basis. And Gabriel doesn't fall under that umbrella. He has people like Tomiyasu, he has people like Saliba and White in a centre-back partnership ahead of Gabriel in this system. Now, is there an argument to keep? I do think there is, because Tomiyasu did get red carded, meaning we're expecting Zinchenko to come in at left back and do that inverted role into midfield, which would then suggest that Partey can't play right back, because I doubt that Arteta, from a control basis, wants both fullbacks inverting into the midfield. So I would think there is a situation, a world that we live in, where the back four against Fulham will be Zinchenko, Gabriel, Saliba and Ben White in his traditional right back role. But again, there is a lot of uncertainty about it. And even though I definitely think there is an argument to keep Gabriel going into this game week due to the lack of borders that they have in defence, I will just say it seems like Arteta is finding many ways to keep Gabriel out of the team. So I would just say, if you do keep him, tread very, very carefully. I think the safe thing to do if you have 2 free transfers is just to accept that Gabriel is a rotation risk and get him gone from your team. And here are some of the replacements that I'm considering for my personal team. So for my personal team, I have narrowed it down to 3 players that I'm considering. It's worth noting that the 3 players are a little bit kind of flexible, and I'll discuss exactly why. But first up, Henry at Brentford is absolutely a consideration for me at 4.6 million. He's cheaper than the 4.9 price of Gabriel now that he's fallen in price. So it's going to free up cash in the bank if any FPL manager required it. I don't necessarily need it because it's worth noting I do have 0.5 million in the bank to invest in the team. It's giving me a little bit of a cushion, which is a little bit better than having nothing in the bank. So Henry is a nice downgrade. The fixtures long term are fantastic for Brentford. They're one of those teams that I do actually back defensively, and he offers that attacking potential that, of course, every manager wants from their defender. The one thing I would say is I think we could easily sleepwalk into a Brentford triple up if we're not careful. A lot of managers have Embuemo, including myself. If you go for Henry in the defence, I do think Visser is going to be a temptation in that front line, especially if someone like Nicholas Jackson doesn't hit the ground running in game week 3. So that could be a benefit. That could be a great thing for some managers. But I think triple Brentford is starting to be a little bit too many eggs in one basket for a side that aren't necessarily the greatest from an attacking perspective. They're not the likes of Brighton or Arsenal, for example. So Henry is absolutely on the radar. He's just going to be guaranteed minutes in that side. I don't have to worry about any sort of rotation. And talking about rotation, here are two players I absolutely think are worries for a lot of FPL managers. So first up, Diaz at Man City, I think, is the guaranteed minutes pick if you can afford it at 5.5 million. He's slightly more expensive, but I just don't see anybody displacing him in this Man City team. He's so integral from a leadership perspective, and I don't think anyone is just as good of a defender as he is in this team. We saw it last season. He was an absolute colossus, and he's continued that into this season. The main downfall with this is that he requires a second free transfer in my personal team to free up the funds. 0.5 million from Gabriel doesn't get me to Diaz after that price fall. But if I was to do 2 free transfers, I could free up some cash from another player and look to invest that in Diaz. But the reason why I didn't pull the trigger on Gabriel to Diaz was because I still can't decide which is the better Man City defender. Gavardia is currently up on your screens at 5 million, but I equally think Akanji at 5.1 is a brilliant option as well. Now, Gavardia offers an easy sideways move for my team because, as I said, I have 0.5 million in the bank. And I do think that Guardiola, obviously paying a record price for him, obviously likes him, and I expect him to play a lot of minutes in this City team. Now, of course, Nathan Ake waiting in the wings, or they could play together, is a little bit of a worry because there can be that later down the line, especially when Champions League comes around the corner. But I do think Gavardia is going to play the majority of minutes in this team, and I need to decide whether it is worthwhile taking the punt on him or paying that slightly more and go for the safer option in Diaz. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, but I think these three are narrowed down as my shortlist for a Gabriel replacement. And I want to quickly show you how they would rotate with the rest of my defence in my team. This is something that I really like using over on Fantasy Football Fix, the rotation planner. At the end of the day, I only really want to play 3 defenders realistically because the midfielders are so strong this year, and obviously having 2 playing forward. So I currently have Chilwell, Udogie, and of course Estupinian in my team. And I don't intend on selling any of those 3 in the coming game week. So I want to see how Rico Henry or the City defenders would rotate. So first up, Rico Henry. We can see here in game week 3, we would bench Udogie. Game week 4, we can bench Estupinian at home against Newcastle. And my other 3, including the new signing in Henry, if I was to buy him, has a great home fixture against Bournemouth. Now, game week 5 will be a little bit of an issue. Henry has a tricky game away against Newcastle, and I'd still have to play Estupinian away against Man United, but I don't think it's the end of the world. We need to remember Man United aren't cooking right now, and Brighton especially are. Game week 6, they work really well together. I get 3 home games, and I can bench Udogie away against Arsenal. And game week 7, a little bit more different, but I'm not worried about it. Estupinian away against Aston Villa, I would have to play him and bench Udogie at home against Liverpool. And my new signing in Henry would then play away against Nottingham Forest. So I do think the Henry rotation in my current defenders works really well for the team. I think I always have 3 good fixtures over this period, apart from maybe game week 5. Now looking at Diaz and Gavardia, end of the day, if you're bringing in a Man City defender, they play every single game. So it's a case of how would my other 3 current defenders rotate with one another? Well, in game week 3, I would simply bench Udogie away against Bournemouth. Game week 4, I can bench Estupinian at home against Newcastle. And the good thing about this is in game week 5, if I think the away game against Man United for Brighton is tricky, I can easily bench Estupinian knowing my other 3 have great fixtures. Now, of course, as I said, Udogie in Spurs has tricky games in 6 and 7. Well, with the introduction of Gavardia or Diaz, they have amazing fixtures and they really work well alongside both Estupiñán and Chilwell in the team. So realistically, of course, Man City rotates better because their fixtures are unbelievable and they're simply Man City. But Brentford rotate really well as well. So I wouldn't be put off by that from a fixture perspective. And I think it's really nice looking at this from a visual perspective to see how your team would look. Because at the end of the day, I ain't using Luton's Kabore at all. Now, as discussed at the start of the video, both Foden and Alvarez are transfer targets for my team, but of course they did rise in price last night, which is a little bit frustrating as I didn't actually buy either of them. I need a little bit more time to understand which one is actually the best option to go for and if it's actually the time to buy them. So I wanted to compare them using the heat maps and the underlying numbers from Fantasy Football Fix. Now, in terms of Man City generally as a setup, they've been playing this back four, which is a little bit different to what we saw at the back end of last season with their 3-2 build-up. And basically, Foden and Alvarez aren't offering the width in this team at all. They are playing very, very centrally in those half spaces, right up alongside Haaland. So if I was to put a touch map, like an average position, they are literally right next to one another in the sort of areas that you're seeing the Foden touch heat map. So very, very similar spots and very promising areas that they're picking up. So looking at the heat map, very similar. I think Foden's had Alvarez has had a few more touches in and around the penalty area, but realistically, they are operating in the same pockets of space. So it comes down to these underlying numbers that we've seen in the opening 2 game weeks. The XG is slightly in Foden's favour at 0.81, but again, I want to say they've only played 2 games. It's such a small sample size to judge anything off. 6 shots for Foden as opposed to Alvarez's 4, and the shots in the box are both the same, highlighting that they're picking up some fantastic positions in this Man City team. And the expected assists, again, nothing too big here to scream and shout about with one asset. 0.75 expected assists for Foden, 0.46 for Alvarez. So some good numbers, but neither one is actually massively ahead of one another that screams he has to be essential for the team. So I think it comes down to your personal preference and what is more of a priority. I think, as I discussed at the start of the video, double Man United isn't going well right now, but I feel comfortable having them for game week 3 at home against Forest. And the same applies to Arsenal. I think some people might be getting itchy feet trying to sell Saka because he isn't on penalties, maybe selling Martinelli because he came off early due to the red card. But at home against Fulham, just doesn't seem like the right time to sell him. And then Mbeumo in the team obviously is a hold. So it's all about your preference for your transfers. For me, I would love to bring in Foden, and if I had to pick one, it would be Phil Foden right now. But realistically, I just don't see a player that I want to sell for an entry point for Foden this game week. So then the question I ask you is, and for myself, Watkins this game week looks more of a transfer out than the likes of my midfielders. So then do I say to myself, well, Alvarez simply has to come into the team? And I don't really want to bring in someone like Alvarez just because I feel like I have to force a Man City player into the team. As I discussed, Foden is the one that I want to bring in out of the 2, and maybe holding off one more game week is better than trying to shoehorn someone like Alvarez into the team and then a week later realise that maybe it was a mistake and I didn't actually bring in the player that I wanted to. So Foden's the one for me, but I don't think I'm going to squeeze him in this week. Okay, so the current game week 3 team is looking exactly like this. This is without any transfers, but again, it's worth noting I have 2 free transfers and 0.5 million in the bank. But I think this 11 picks itself on the basis of some rotation risks in the shape of Gabriel. So Pickford in goal at home is an obvious pick against Wolves. I know there are a lot of temptations to sell him. I have considered upgrading him to someone like an Edison, but freeing up that 1 million to go to him just doesn't feel right for my own team personally. And I know some want to go to Sanchez of Chelsea, but I ain't touching double Chelsea right now defensively. I am happy with my 1 in Chilwell. Udogie over Gabriel, unless we were to get news that Gabriel was starting, I think it is too risky to go for him. And I think Udogie's looked very good from an attacking perspective, so I wouldn't rule out attacking returns for him away against Bournemouth, and Estupiñán picks himself at home against West Ham. As I said, I am content with the midfield. I know some of you aren't, but I am happy with what I'm seeing in this midfield. So they obviously pick themselves, and I'm comfortable putting the vice captaincy on Bukayo Saka. And the front 2, Haaland with the captaincy, of course. But Watkins away against Burnley is the question mark that I do have. I think that Aston Villa looked brilliant in game week 3, and I think Watkins looked good himself, and he's always going to score goals. But now he's off penalties and he's 8 million. And we have people like Alvarez or Nicholas Jackson at cheaper prices. I'm starting to question whether it is the time now to pull the trigger, sell someone like Watkins and bring in these players that have brilliant fixtures for the next 4 game weeks. And I know Watkins has really good entry points, but in game week 4, he does play Liverpool. I know that might be good for some, but there's other better fixtures for players. So right now, I am currently considering selling both Gabriel and Watkins, freeing up some funds in the bank along the process as well, and just giving myself a flexible route in game week 4 and beyond. And this is how the team would look with the transfers I intend on making. So here is how my team would look with the 2 intended transfers I have. Gabriel to Gavardiol. I know he could be a slight risk, but I just think he's going to play week in, week out. I need to gather a little bit more information to get an understanding whether he is a risk, but I really do like him at 5 million. I just think this guy's going to play. He's too good to not for Man City. And the other move, Watkins to Nicholas Jackson. Now, I'm not as bullish on Nicholas Jackson as some FPL managers out there. But as I said, if I go for the Man City defender, which is my preference, I don't want to bring in Alvarez as well and block myself out of the player that I know I prefer in Phil Foden. So going for Gavardiol simply just makes my decision up for me, doing Watkins down to Jackson. I like it because it frees up more money in the bank, which is always great to be flexible with my team in the future game weeks. He has 2 fixtures against Luton and Nottingham Forest in the next 2 at home. And I haven't actually been as impressed with him or Chelsea in general as other managers. But I just think these fixtures are fantastic. And it's worth noting, Amanda Broha has returned to training, but I don't think he's going to take any game time away from Jackson for the foreseeable future. It's an ACL that he's returned from. I just do not see Jackson coming off over these games. And these are the ones I want to double down on. I want to own a Chelsea attacking player for these 2 fixtures, and Jackson feels like the right one. So this is how the team would look with my 2 free transfers, and I feel like it's looking very strong and better than what I would have without the transfers. Yes guys, okay, so that's going to wrap up today's Game Week 3 transfer plans video. As I discussed, I am looking on using both of my free transfers and bringing in Gavardiol and Jackson, but that hasn't been made yet. And if you do want to stay up to date with any of my live transfers that I do make, I do recommend checking out Patreon, as I update my members there instantly when I do make a transfer, as obviously I can't do these videos live all the time, so you may miss out on the moves that I do make in that moment. But thank you so much for tuning into this video. If you did enjoy it, please do consider hitting that like button and of course smashing that subscribe button, and I will see you in the next video. Take care guys, cheers.